Good evening. I've got 7 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order. I ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jeff Elshoff.
Here.
Dr. Joel Schroeder.
Here.
Mr. Justin Smith.
Here.
Mr. John Welch.
Present.
Miss Diane Nguyen. Here. And you have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. This evening, we have Pastor Gary Green from the Gospel Assembly Church in Bel Aire to lead us in prayer. Pastor Green.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you. Please join me in prayer, bowing of our heads, acknowledging Him. Father, we give you thanks tonight for all your many blessings, for being a giver of life, the author of everlasting life, for your Son Jesus, for forgiveness, for the hope of heaven. We give you thanks for all your many blessings. We give you thanks, Lord, for this council, for the mayor and all of its members. Your word tells us that if we acknowledge you in all our ways, that you would direct our paths. The fact I'm standing here praying tonight, this council acknowledges you, Father. So I pray you direct their paths tonight. I pray you bless and satisfy the needs that are needed to be met here at this meeting. Strengthen each and every one as they make tough decisions. Let their hearts be united in well-being for our community. Pray for strength. We pray, Lord, that they'll be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail, coming up with answers, being fruitful. Guide them now so this meeting can be productive, decisive and effective, pleasing to you in attitude and spirit. I believe we are living in the times of, Apostle Paul said, perilous times. So I pray for your divine intervention, protection over our community here, Lord. Protect with good health and protection for our mayor and each council member, for all the first responders, our police chief, all those involved in this community. I humbly ask now, at this time of most difficult year, you would have mercy on us and remove this virus from our presence. Bless us with good health. I pray if there's anyone, loved one, represented by those present here tonight, that you would allow them to feel your presence and acknowledge their need. If there's a loved one that's sick, or any dark cloud, any situation, let them feel your presence here in this meeting tonight. Remind us, Lord, you are with us, no matter what goes on in every situation. There's nowhere we go, you aren't right there with us. We give you thanks and praise for that. We ask all these things in your wonderful name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please join me for a pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, we have 2 proclamations to read. The first one has to do with Arbor Day. To the citizens of Bel Aire, Kansas, greetings. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special date be set aside for planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed in the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas 2021 is the 149th anniversary of the holiday, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling cost, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. I, therefore, Jim Benage, Mayor, do hereby proclaim April 30th as the 149th anniversary celebration of Arbor Day in the city of Bel Aire, and urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and to urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Second proclamation is Building Code Safety Month of May 2021. To the citizens of Bel Aire, Kansas, greetings. Whereas our cities continue efforts to address the critical issues of safety, energy efficiency, and sustainability in the built environment that affect our citizens, both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster, give us confidence that our structures are safe and sound. And whereas our confidence is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings. And whereas these guardians, dedicate members of the International Code Council, develop and implement the highest quality codes to protect Americans in buildings where they live, learn, work, worship, play. And whereas the international codes, the most widely adopted building safety, energy, and fire prevention codes in the nation, are used by most U.S. cities, counties, and states. These modern building codes also include safeguards to protect the public from natural disasters such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, and earthquakes. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council and an International Code Council Foundation to remind the public about the critical role of our communities, largely unknown guardians of public safety, our local code officials who assure us of safe, efficient, and livable buildings. And whereas safer buildings, safer communities, safer world, the theme of Building Safety Month of 2021 encourages all Americans to raise awareness of the importance of building safety, green and sustainable building, pool, spa, hot tub safety, and new technologies in the construction industry. Building Safety Month 2021 encourages appropriate steps everyone can take to ensure that places where we live, learn, work, worship, and play are safe and sustainable, and recognize that countless lives have been saved due to the implementation of safety codes by local and state agencies. And whereas each year, in observance of Building Safety Month, Americans are asked to consider projects to improve building safety, sustainability at home and in community, and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state building departments and federal agencies in protecting lives and property. Therefore, I, Jim Benage, Mayor, do hereby proclaim May as Building Safety Month in the city of Bel Aire and urge all citizens to join this community commitment to building safety. Move on to item 6, determine agenda additions. Are there any agenda additions to consider? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. It contains only the minutes of the April 6th City Council meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second. I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item 8, discussion of appropriate and approval of appropriations ordinance. This period includes payment to Sedgwick County Treasurer for the second half of specials amounting to $167,891.81 on land, bank, and city-owned parcels.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve appropriations ordinance 21-07.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item 9, city requested appearances. Mr. Jay Engelmeyer with MKEC is here to give us an update on the Woodlawn project. Mr. Engelmeyer.
Good evening, folks. I know you're getting tired of seeing me and updating you
I
on
think
this
we'll be
project.
tired of it. When the
But-
project's done, then we'll be tired of it.
Okay. But I don't have a whole lot to report tonight, but I do have, well, finally, some good news. We have our railroad permits all in place. Basically, we have satisfied the UP Railroad, and all of that has been sent to KDOT, and we're into the final, in the design phase, we're into the final step, which is called the PS&E plan review by the Bureau, or by KDOT's construction and maintenance. What they do in that phase is they will go through some of my plans. Basically, they're looking at the bid items and quantities just to make sure I'm bidding things the right way. And there'll be some other, in the plans, we have a lot of schedule of quantities and such, and they'll go through those. We actually started that process some months ago, and then because of the railroad and right away, they stopped that. I don't know if that process is going to start over from scratch, but basically at this point, we're looking at a couple month process. And at that point, and if you remember, I think I've said this in the past, once KDOT gets through that process, they'll actually advertise and bid the plans themselves, so the city doesn't have to. I don't have the exact bid date. I don't remember, Matt. Okay. And in fact, I think I'm optimistic we can move that up because we've started this PS&E process. So basically all of the big hurdles have been jumped over. This KDOT last step is there should be no surprises. It should go pretty smoothly. If they'll send me a question or two, I'll answer them immediately. And if there's a need for any plan edits at that point, we would make them. So that's the step we're in now. I will be talking to the person in charge of this project at KDOT tomorrow and try to get a little more information. So I'll have them cornered because we'll be in a meeting together. Other than that, like I said, with the railroad, there's nothing more to do. We got through that railroad process on our, I'm trying to think of the right word, not through the crossings, but just through the storm sewer on the right of way. And I was expecting them to say we'd have to obtain an easement from them, which would come with a cost, but at the end they said that doesn't have to happen. So that was more good news on top of the other. As you've probably noticed somewhat, the utility work, not the city's water and sewer project, but the private utilities, they're wrapping things up. Everything south of 45th Street, is my understanding from all of the private utility companies, everyone's done with everything. Evergy still has some power poles in the 45th Street intersection that needs to be moved. They have formally requested from me that some of those be moved during construction, because to places where they have to move them to, there's some ground differential elevations. And if they move them now, they may have to move them again later. I'm meeting with Evergy tomorrow to work on that. It's probably not my decision whether some of that can be done during construction, but that's one of the things I'll work with KDOT on. And then AT&T is completely done. Kansas Gas is completely done. Cox has a line that's buried in 45th Street that they want to move on to the Evergy poles, which now they have to wait until we get a resolve from Evergy. I think just the fact that there's an underground line that's not moved, it may have to be moved, and that may kill Evergy's plans, but then Evergy can deny Cox the ability to put on their poles. So that's something I've got to work through with both companies and get a quick resolve to, so we can get that out of the way. And then I can update you what I know on the water and sanitary sewer project. It's ongoing. I know I'll stay here for questions related to the change order from Donlinger. I know Garber Engineering is in Dakota's handling the construction administration on that, but I'm up to speed on it. So I think I can answer the questions appropriately. So that's an update. That's really all I have at this point, or as soon as I know more from KDOT, I mean, I fully anticipate as we go through the PS&E process, that one day they're going to say, okay, we're going to bid it on this date. So,
Well, I'm really glad to hear that we've moved that along to that stage. And please keep us informed if and when it shouldn't be an if, it's when they do get it approved and get it for bid letting, so that we will know the status of that. Okay.
Sure will.
Any questions for Mr. Engelmeyer? Okay, well, thank you very much for the update. It's very exciting. Great. So we'll move on to item 10, citizens' concerns. Do we have any citizens in the audience that would like to speak to council? And hearing none, we'll move on to council member reports. So Mr. Welch, would you like to begin?
Oh, sure. I don't have much to say, except I did finally get my second COVID shot. That's open to everybody now. You can, I think, even just walk into the Wichita Library if you want a COVID shot. So if you haven't done it, please do. And also this weekend, and I'm sure somebody else will cover this, but there's a blood drive with a few open slots this Saturday here in City Hall.
Great. I do believe COVID shots are available here at City Hall tomorrow. Is that correct, Mr. Lasher? Thank you. Mr. Elsoff?
I have no report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Dr. Schroeder?
I have no report.
Ms. Nguyen?
I have no report.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I also have no report.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so move on to the mayor's report. So on April 8th, I attended via Zoom the South Central Legislation Delegation meeting. This was headed up by Representative Casey Obison, who represents Bel Aire residents west of Woodlawn in Topeka. He represents them in Topeka. The focus of this meeting was agriculture in Kansas and its economic impact. We often overlook the obvious of agriculture. Mayor McPherson's Mayor Brown pointed out that Kansas exports some $8 billion from 93 counties in agriculture. We heard from Jessica Stone from AGCO in Heston. She gave a presentation. AGCO employs some 1,200 people. I had no idea they had that many people working there. Their facility is on 345 acres with 35 acres developed into 9 buildings, some 1.3 million square feet. 2021 was a strong year for AGCO. They are farmer focused. They are also in need of more people. They're offering sign-on bonuses and referral bonuses. And to get more people in particular, they need machinists, welders, maintenance people, and engineers. So if people are needing work, AGCO may be your opportunity. AGCO is just one of multiple farm equipment manufacturers located in Kansas. John Deere and Kubota, among others, have significant manufacturing facilities in Kansas. We also had a presentation from Sheldon Coleman. You may remember Mr. Coleman from the Coleman Company and then Big Dog Motorcycles. The last few years, he has been growing industrial hemp. For hemp to be industrial, it has to be less than 0.3% THC. Mr. Coleman thinks that this should be raised to 1% due to difficulty in achieving the 0.3%. Industrial hemp can be used for clothing, food and beverages, paper, building supplies, plastics, fuel, and chemical cleanup. The biggest issue he has today in marketing is extraction. The oil in industrial hemp is the most valuable product, but this takes a multi-million-dollar investment in plant and equipment. And lastly, we heard from Mike Beam, Kansas Secretary of Agriculture. Almost $50 billion of Kansas economy is agriculture. I said 8 billion earlier, but that's exports, 50 billion in total agriculture. Which represents about 13% of our workforce. Kansas is the 5th of all states in agriculture sales. And on April 8th, I also met with Central Park HOA. We discussed the sidewalk issue. They also had some questions about who's responsible for maintaining the alleys in Central Park. I learned from Mr. Lasher that this city maintains these streets. They also expressed concern about some trucks using residential streets. Most of these are directly related to multiple building projects. Contractors are always encouraged to use the least amount of residential streets to get to the building site. On April 13th, I met with Ted Henry and the auditor who does our annual city financial audit. This was concerning our prior year's noted deficiencies in our financial transactions. These were not serious issues, but opportunities to improve our process to ward off against errors and or embezzlements. After going through these processes, Ted made a list of things he believes he can do to improve on these. He is working on these improvements. So the financial audit for 2020, which will be reported in July, may continue to show these deficiencies, but should reflect recent actions to address these deficiencies. On April 13th, I also attended the WAMPO meeting via Zoom. WAMPO has started the monthly presentations with cities, provide their growth patterns and connectivity plans to connect with other jurisdictions within WAMPO. Last month, the city of Mays gave their presentation. This month was city of Derby. Bel Aire is up next to make a presentation in May. Mr. Peraza said there may be an award to the jurisdiction that gives their best efforts. I think he's trying to dangle a carrot out there. This is a great way for Bel Aire to showcase the many activities in Bel Aire, and I know Mr. Lasher is putting it together, and I believe he will make a great presentation. WAMPO did receive some $3.7 million in funds as part of the coronavirus bill passed in December. I think President Trump signed that bill. And WAMPO is still waiting for more guidance on how to use those funds, so they don't know what they can do with them. Most likely they will be used for TIP projects that are ready to move forward. Andrew Nave from the Greater Wichita Partnership gave a presentation on the regional growth plan. He says we have 7 core industry sectors. We are currently the #1 region in the country for percentage of manufacturing workers. 2 large investments in the region are Amazon with the $2 million square foot facility in Park City and 100,000 square foot facility in Northeast Wichita. Deloitte is also building on the an innovation facility on WSU's Innovation Campus. Deloitte is doing this as they recognize that our region is a top region for manufacturing in the USA. KDOT announced the starting of the Gold Project Phase 1A on the North Junction. This project will run through 2023 and will include flyover ramp from northbound I-135 to southbound 235 with a 2-lane ramp. This will affect northbound I-135 to eastbound K-254 ramp, as the new flyover will incorporate the eastbound traffic as well. So that's pretty exciting. That's probably the biggest part of the problem of that North Junction is that northbound traffic. I've been running through it the last couple of days, and I got 2 more days to go of it. So hopefully I'll be done that for a while. Okay. Then on June 2nd, there will be an active transportation committee meeting that Bel Aire will participate in to review our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So we get 2 times up with WAMPO coming up pretty soon. On April 14th, I attended the Utility Advisory Committee meeting. This was the first meeting Mr. Tyler Dinn participated as a member. There was some question about the brush site. It was stated by Ann Stevens and myself that the brush site is closed. The city is still looking for options. I suggested this group might look into doing a did you know to inform citizens of their responsibility to keep trucks from breaching sidewalks and therefore cause stress damage. One member believed that this might be outside the scope of the UAC, so I'm thinking about other options for that. Did you see Mr. Lasher on KPTS this weekend? Or I guess it was last Thursday at 7:30. Several citizens said he did a great job representing Bel Aire. I did get to see it on Sunday on a rebroadcast. It will also be rebroadcast on May 19th at 3:30 on channel 8.2. It should be available on KPTS YouTube channel as well. I do not know if it will be re-aired on cable. I surmise it will. I don't have cable, so I don't know. Check with KPTS about listings for cable. Sedgwick County has experienced an uptick in COVID-19 infections. We're now at 4.1%. Hopefully this is just noise in the data, but testing also increased to about 1,500 per day in the last week. We continue to do well, but we clearly need to keep vigilant with good practices. Kansas continues to make slow progress in vaccinating people. We are now at about 36% of Kansans with at least 1 dose. Kansas has now received about 2.193 million doses. First dose is administered just over 1.046 million, and just over 636,000 have second doses. I did get my second dose on April 8th. I understand about 1/2 of all adults in the United States have received at least 1 dose of the vaccine. So that's good news. We're making good progress in that area. So I'll now ask our city attorney for her report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, the city did send a response to our senators regarding Senate Bill 87, which was one of those bills that kind of made it through the committees to the floor for debate regarding the current countywide tax formula, which allowed counties, currently since 1978, counties have had to negotiate a share of all tax proceeds with cities in their jurisdiction. This would remove that requirement. So in the future, counties could propose a ballot item to have a county retain all the tax revenue. Now, there's incentive to negotiate with larger cities within their jurisdiction where a lot of that tax money is generated, but smaller cities really lose out here because they're smaller, so their proceeds are somewhat fixed. A lot of residents from smaller cities go into larger cities and the county to do business, and that justifies the county sharing that tax revenue. We did respond to our legislatures, and they, the bill, and several cities did, and we got a request to respond right away. And just based off of the council's goal to ensure that, all bills be equitable and well-funded, we went ahead and sent a response, and the league reported that that bill was set aside. So we don't anticipate any further action on that, and that's favorable to the city at this point. And we're watching other legislation. The legislature will be back in session on May 3rd.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate you sending that information out to the legislatures. Mr. Lasher.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a lot of stuff happening the next couple of weeks that I wanted to share with our citizens at home. Citywide garage sales start this Thursday, and they'll go through Saturday. So you may see some neighbors with their garage doors open for sales or more traffic, and that's what we hope for. The Baton public meeting for the reconstruction of Baton is this Thursday, April 22nd at 6 p.m., and that's at the rec center. So Baton is basically to the west of the rec center and will be rebuilt. And so with this meeting, they'll be sharing with the citizens that live along there how they'll get to and from their house. I think the goal all along has been it'll be done in a month. And so hopefully that'll limit the inconvenience of the residents. But anyway, it's at 6 p.m. at the rec center, and encourage anybody that lives along Baton to attend as this will impact them. On Thursday, April 22nd, also during the day, the City Hall will be a COVID vaccination site, and it's from 10 to 3. No appointments are required, so people can just show up and get the vaccine. And there will be, 3 weeks later, there's the second shot, and of course that will be closed to only the people that got the first shot. For Thursday, but again, no appointments, just show up. And then Saturday, Mr. Welch mentioned the blood drive is taking place here. We also have a National Take Back Drugs Day, and the police department is sponsoring that. So that's from 10 to 2. So people they'll be set up on the police side of City Hall. And that's where if people have old prescriptions or prescriptions they no longer need, they can drop it off, and then it will be properly disposed of. We much prefer citizens doing that than flushing it down the toilet or the drain. But that's the right way to eliminate. Or if someone has passed away or something, and you cleaned out their cabinet and there's a bunch of drugs you don't know what they are, again, they'll take them. And then the following Saturday, which is May 1st, the shredding and e-recycling will be here at City Hall. And that is a drive-through, starts from 9 to noon, so people can bring any old electronics, used old cell phones, computers, anything like that. And then we'll have a shredder that will be on site, and people can drop off any documents they want shredded. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Mr.
Thank you.
Lasher,
Yes.
on the Baton project, were all those citizens that'll be impacted notified personally by mail or phone call or something?
Yes, they all received a letter. Everybody that's along the road received a letter notifying them. And then we also been putting it out on social media too.
Okay, so there's no excuse for them not to know what's going on.
Right.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, the vaccine here at City Hall, I think I thought it was going to be tomorrow, but I probably was wrong about that. Could you clarify that, please?
Yes, it's April 22nd, Thursday.
Thursday, April 22nd. Okay, so day after tomorrow. Very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on, ordinance resolutions and final actions. First item is consider accepting revised petitions for sanitary sewer and stormwater improvement, Chapel Landing, 3rd edition. And the developer has submitted revised petitions due to the increased cost of infrastructure bids. Our city manager can explain the reasons and process in detail.
Sorry. Actually, I'm going to defer that to Mr.
Kinley?
Kinley.
Okay.
Or Ann?
Or Ann?
Ann, yes.
Hopefully we have somebody that knows the background.
Ken's on the spot and he didn't even design this one.
Oh. Okay.
So bids were accepted for Chapel Landing 3rd edition, which is located just west of the currently being constructed Bristol Hollows. Going into the bids, we were advised that several contractors met out on site and dug some test holes to figure out what the ground was like so they could make informed bids. They did that. The engineer was notified that the ground was as bad, if not worse, than Bristol Hollows. You're fairly familiar with what's going on at Bristol Hollows. We have a fairly sizable change order left out for this later on this evening. So that kind of informed the bidders and the bids went up. So the developer, Mr. Lasher and I spoke after the bids were taken, and we were thinking, well, you know, maybe we want to look at other alternatives. Maybe we look at a lift station, but I had conveyed that to the engineer, to Boffman, and they had, well, Mr. Lasher and I were talking, they were talking to the developer, and the developer says, nope, I want to move forward. I'm okay with it. So we are proceeding onward. He has signed a revised petition both for the sanitary sewer and stormwater drain improvements to reflect those increased costs. So that is the first step. We do the petitions revision, and then Mr. Cowan is here with resolutions for those revised costs, and then we can accept the bids later on this evening.
So as I remember on Bristol Hollows, which I know we're later on the agenda tonight, but the request there was to put drain tiles along the street and to move dirt in to add elevation for the construction sites. Do you anticipate that in this development will have similar type of activity going on?
Yes, I do, but that will be in the paving, which will come later, and they will design that into the improvements.
Could be designed into the improvements? You think?
Yes.
Okay.
So there may be a possibility, or it may be where they come back later and have to revise the paving petition at that point, but we won't really know that until we get further in to the project. They are also designing the grades, the overall grading of the site to be a little bit more balanced. So hopefully we're not into the groundwater as much as we were in Bristol Hollows. Part of the reason for that is we had to build the big berm, and they tried to balance out the site. So the amount of dirt that is being cut from the site equals the amount of dirt that is being filled on the site. So it's something that you try and do with every job. And some of it's easier than others, but they just didn't realize how high the groundwater table was in that area. So the nice thing is that they might be able to sink some wells and water their grass. But, you know, it's kind of, you try and look for silver linings when you can.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr.
Could I, now that Ann has explained the project, I'd like to talk a little bit about this revised petition, because this is kind of a unique situation. If you look through it, you realize that it was so much above the engineer's estimate. You'll get to that later on in the bid. or in the bidding documents. So when you see petitions, you'll notice that it says what lots there are that are going to be included in that. And then it sets an engineer's estimate. And the reason that's in there is for situations just as this. So when the engineers work with city staff, they determine what the cost is going to be, and that equates into what the special assessments are going to be. So when they go into their development, they have this idea of whatever the cost of houses are going to be, then they need the specials to be in a certain range. And so that's what that engineer's estimate does. It puts that dollar amount in there so that if a situation would come up like this, where the bids are so much over, the city can't go ahead and accept those because it's above the engineer's estimate. So that's protecting that developer and ultimately the landowners or the property owners, that their specials aren't going to go above what they signed in that petition. So the option is when they come in over is then, as Ann explained, it goes back to the developer to either say, let's rebid it, let's re-engineer it, what can we do to get that price down? Or knowing the additional cost, are they okay adjusting those specials? And that's what Ann was explaining. We went back to them and said, well, there are other options. This is obviously a concern. And they ultimately said, no, they were okay with the higher amount and knowing that would increase specials. So that's why the revision is here. And that allows us to move forward with the bids, even though they were much higher than what was originally petitioned for. So you'll notice in this revised petition, the dollar amount's higher to cover those additional costs. But the developer had to sign off on them like they did the first time.
How much did we add per lot? Just a rough guess.
I don't have that information. They didn't provide that to me.
Okay. Just wondered what was acceptable to the builder.
It was about, between the sanitary sewer and the stormwater, it was about $500,000 over budget. So that, yeah, that adds quite a bit.
That's close to 10,000 a lot then, because there's 47 lots.
So what can happen is, and it happens on occasion, is because that may, in fact, a person may look at it and say, well, those specials are too high. Depending on what the developer bought the land for, sometimes they'll pay, before we actually spread the special assessments, they'll pay some of that cost down. So and they may feel like, well, because of all the improvements, we'll get additional from the lots to cover that, what we have to pay down. So sometimes that may happen. I don't know if that's the case here, but that could happen if these specials get too much and they feel like they can make the money up on the land, they'll just pay them down.
This is also a duplex development, so we don't know if they're selling the individual lots or if they're maintaining them themselves.
Mr. Smith.
So with the findings on this land, it sounds like one of the possible remedies is they'll bring on some additional dirt, build things up, I think is what we heard on the Bristol Hollows example. When those types of changes happen, is there going to be a drainage study that's done to understand any potential drainage impacts on other properties around it? And if so, is there any chance that will affect the stormwater drain improvements that we're about to talk about here?
So the drainage study was already completed for this project. It was completed with the initial platting of the property. And that is mostly based on, it's more impacted by the hard surfacing, the roofs and the pavement and the driveways than it is by the slopes of the properties themselves. So there's not a whole lot of impact that is going to be seen for the differences in the elevation, such as Bristol Hollows. In this project, I don't foresee elevations changing much. They're not designed, it's not completed design yet, but I don't foresee them running into the same issues that we have in Bristol Hollows. I have been in touch with the design engineer, and they have assured me they are keeping their foundations up and keeping the ground up as high as possible so they can avoid these issues, the Bristol Hollows
So
issues here.
You don't foresee a and impact other properties based on the changes that are going to need to be made, or drain water improvements needed as a result of these changes that they're going to need to do.
Correct. The ponds that are present in both Bristol Hollows and Chapel Landing Third, they're both designed to maintain the pre-development runoff in a post-development condition. The changes that neighboring property owners will see is that the post-development runoff is concentrated to a location instead of being kind of spread throughout the site. But the quantity is the same or less.
But that's just surface runoff, right?
That
What
is-
we're talking about now is drain tile to drain some of the subsoil moisture.
And that all goes into the pond. And so
And
there,
it's size big enough to handle that extra.
it is sized, it should be, so we're talking about two different projects. So just kind of
Okay.
keeping that together, but it should be sized to accept the additional runoff. And because that's the groundwater.
So for Chapel Landing, this first petition, all we're talking about is surface water. We're not draining anything that's 3 or 4 or 5 feet down.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And we've done all the engineering at this point to know that that's true.
Yes. Yes, the project has been bid for construction. It is ready to go with the steps that Mr. Lasher outlined.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept the revised petitions for sanitary sewer and stormwater drain improvements, Chapel Landing Third Edition.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any additional questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item B. So with the plating of Rock Spring Fourth, one lot was eliminated to allow new street connection between the additions, and one lot was changed from Rock Spring 3 to Rock Spring 4, which has resulted in revised petition. So Ken Lee is from Garver Engineering, is here to answer any questions. I think he knows something about this one.
Yeah, it only seems like I'm here all the time. So just briefly, I want to jump back to the last item, the question about the drain tiles and stuff, just as this is just another engineer's opinion. Generally, those drain tiles, you're going to find that's a very slow rate of water. It's just draining off. When they're first installed, they might pull a fair amount of water, but over time, it's going to end up being a small trickle compared to what the storm sewer normally carries in a heavier storm event. So I wouldn't anticipate you're going to have any drainage problems. The storm sewer is designed for heavy, intense rain events. Those drain tails are more taken care of, just incidental water. So I wouldn't expect any issues. So I think she's got it answered correctly, but I just wanted to interject on that real quickly. As far as Rock Springs Third Phase 2, as Ty explained, I'm Ken Lee with Garver. Last meeting, we actually did the water petition where we did a replacement water petition. This is the sanitary sewer and paving for the same issue, where I realized after that we'd missed the deadline to submit these, but we had the same issue where we had a lot change on these. So we went ahead and adjusted the petitions to match the new plating layout. So other than that, everything else is pretty much the same. No real changes other than that, but I can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Lee?
Mr. Mayor,
Dr. Schroeder?
I'll motion to accept the revised petitions for paving and sanitary sewer improvements, Rock Springs Third, Phase 2.
Second.
I have a motion for Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item C, Developers Bank requested an adjustment to the benefit districts to encumber fewer lots on the Phase 1 improvements, and this is Skyview at Block 49. As a result, the petitions are revised to meet the new number. Ken Lee from Garver is here to answer questions for this and item D, which I think is related. Well, one sanitary sewer improvements is one is, well, they're both sanitary. Oh,
Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Phase 1 and Phase 2 is what the difference is. Okay.
So on these items, what happened is we had submitted petitions and prepared them. And when I first talked to the developer, he said he wanted to balance out the specials as close as he could between phase 1 and phase 2 improvements. And so what we had done is we had allocated a share to the phase 2 improvements to help build phase 1, because the specials were going to be in balance. One was going to be like 192 a month. One was going to be 183 a month. By balancing them, we got them to about 187 a month. So we had done that at his request. Well, so we prepared the petitions, we turned them in. Unfortunately, the petitions are always submitted before the banks get a hold, and the bank looked at it and they said, well, we don't like this. And the reason why they do is whenever the banks are doing letters of credit to guarantee the work being done, it's for 35% of the amount of the petition. And so what that means is the developer and his bank is on the line, or their bank is on the hook until 35% of the lots are occupied, have been issued certificates of occupancy. By setting up that first petition to include all 110 lots, it was going to require that almost all of phase 1 was complete before they'd be able to get their letter of credit released. So the bank said, we would prefer that you don't do that, and the developer decided that the small imbalance between the two phases was going to be acceptable. So now by rebalancing it, instead of having 40 some lots done before he can get his letters of credit released, he's only going to have something on the order of add the 2, carry the 3, divide by 5, 25 or so of them. It'll be far fewer lots that they'll have to be done. So it'll help them out on getting their letters of credit released, which helps them continue on doing future phases where they don't have to be burdened by those other letters of credit. And this applies to both items C and D.
Any questions for Mr. Lee on this item C or D? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsaw,
I motion to accept a revised petition for Phase 1 sanitary sewer improvements, Skyview at Block 49.
I'll second.
a motion by Mr. Elsaw and a second by Ms. Nguyen. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to item D, which is really just phase 2 of the same project.
Mr. Mayor,
Dr. Schroeder.
I motion to accept a revised petition for Phase 2 sanitary sewer improvements, Skyview at Block 49.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. On item E, and this consider a resolution determining advisability of making certain internal improvements. This has to do with sanitary sewer improvements in Chapel Landing, 3rd edition. The petitions for stormwater and sewer in Chapel Landing 3rd were revised and accepted earlier in this meeting. As a result, Resolution R17-16 and R17-17 need to be repealed and restated with these resolutions. Each resolution requires a separate action. Kevin Cowan from Gilmore and Bell is here to explain the process and answer any questions. And that is E and F they're related to that, and they require separate actions. Mr. Gowan.
Good evening. I'm probably one of your least favorite people these days since I keep sending these resolutions to you. E and F are, as the mayor referenced, related to the Chapel Landing revised petitions that were discussed earlier. And this is a bit of housekeeping, and part of this relates to the fact that you want to accept bids later. So there were resolutions that were adopted pursuant to the original petitions. Resolution 17-16 is what we're talking about with sanitary sewer. It does not have an authorized financing amount that's sufficient to cover the bid. And so we want to always make sure you have this authorizing resolution in place before you accept a bid. It's a cash basis law thing. So that's why we wanted to take action on these two items, E and F, tonight in advance of the bids later. And I'll also add that there was a time when I may have drafted this just as a supplemental resolution to 17-16. And I found it is less confusing, particularly when we get to the assessment stage and are going to be assembling bond transcripts, to just have one resolution and not have to worry about, oh, this was that resolution from 2021, and we also have to include the resolution from 2017. So that's why it's amending, restating, and repealing the earlier resolutions. Reads exactly the same, except we now have a sufficient authorized amount. And so we won't have to worry about 17-16 after tonight. We'll just have to deal with this 2021 resolution. So that's some background on this particular item.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you for that explanation. Any questions for Mr. Gowan? Mr. Smith?
Make a motion to approve resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of said improvements in accordance with such findings. Sanitary sewer improvements, Chapel Landing, third edition, and amending and restating and repealing resolution number R-1716.
Second.
First by motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Elsoff, is that right?
No.
Oh, it was Dr. Schroeder? Okay,
Yes.
thank you for the clarification. Motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. And moving on to item F.
Mr. Mayor, I'll motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings. Stormwater drainage improvements, Chapel Landing, third edition, and amending, restating, and repealing resolution number R-1717.
I'll second.
A motion by Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item G. So the developer of Chapel Landing Fourth is moving forward with public infrastructure installation. At our April 6th meeting, council accepted the petitions for these improvements. Now the authorization for funding resolutions come before council for approval. The cost of the improvements will be special assessed to the benefiting lots in the development. Each resolution, and we have G through J, so that's 4 resolutions, I believe, will need a separate action. And of course, Kevin Cowan is here to answer any questions.
So this is more typical where you had recent petitions for new projects, and now it's time to have the authorizing resolution so that eventually these projects can be bid as those projects move forward. So very similar to what we did a lot of at the last meeting, but again, a little more standard and maybe more accustomed. You're more accustomed to it.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsoff.
I motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings, paving improvements, Chapel Landing and Chapel Landing fourth editions, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Elsoff and a second by Ms. Nguyen. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item H.
Mr. Mayor,
Dr. Schroeder.
I'll motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings. Sanitary sewer improvements, Chapel Landing and Chapel Landing fourth editions, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion by Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Welch and Smith, but I'll take, you think he was first? Okay, I'll take Mr. Smith. So first by Dr. Schroeder and second by Mr. Smith.
Doesn't make any difference.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item I.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings, sidewalk improvements, Chapel Landing, and Chapel Landing fourth editions, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Mr. Elsoff? Oh, thank you. Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Elsoff. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item J.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsoff.
Dr. Schroeder.
we both have short hair anyway.
I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making the improvements in accordance with such findings. Water distribution improvements, Chapel Landing and Chapel Landing fourth editions, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item K. This is a water petition for Rock Springs third and fourth editions was revised and accepted earlier in this meeting as discussed. As a result, Resolution R 1909 needs to be repealed and restated with this resolution. So Kevin Cowan is still here to answer questions.
Yeah, so this relates to what Mr. Lee explained a little earlier. This relates to an amended petition that was submitted and accepted last meeting. So we'll have another one of these in the future for the paving and sanitary sewer, but it basically relates to what Mr. Lee explained, changing the description of the lots that are going to be assessed. And again, same explanation as I gave before, would rather repeal and replace those prior resolutions. And so this reference is 19-09 that will be repealed and replaced with this updated language.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsoff.
I motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, Kansas, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings, water distribution system improvements, Rock Spring third edition, fourth edition, and amending, restating, and repealing resolution number R-19-09, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Motion by Mr. Elsoff and a second by Ms. Nguyen. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item L, developer of Rock Springs Fourth is moving forward with Phase 1 of public infrastructure installation. At the April 6th meeting, council accepted petitions for these improvements. Now the authorization for funding resolutions come before the council for approval. And the cost of these improvements will be special assessed to the benefiting lots and development. Each resolution, L through O, not zero, which are 4 resolutions, will need a separate action. And Kevin Cowan is here to answer any questions.
So again, this is the more typical process where you have recent petitions for new projects and a phase that's moving forward. So these are just the resolutions that authorize those projects and allow you at some point to move forward with bids and maybe a financing of those projects.
Mr. Mayor,
Dr. Schroeder.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings. Sanitary sewer improvements, Rock Springs fourth edition, Phase 1, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Elsoff or Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Elsoff.
Are we on M or L?
We are
L.
on L.
That was, yes, that was not the one for L.
I did. Are you sure we weren't on? Did we skip L?
Yeah, I think we just skipped L.
Yeah. I
That's
think you're
okay,
right.
we can
We
do it
are on
reverse,
L.
right?
So did you read?
I did read
item O?
M, but I think we did skip L.
Well, is it acceptable to go on and proceed with motion on item O and then back up to L?
In this case, you can. I don't see how it would be challenged because you're going back to it.
Okay, so for item O, the motion was made by Dr.
No, I made it for M.
Okay, for item M, the motion was made by Dr. Schroeder, and the second was by Mr. Elsoff. Any discussion on item M? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Now let's back up to item L.
Mr. Mayor,
Dr. Schroeder.
I'll motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings. Paving improvements, Rock Springs 4th Edition, Phase 1, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Schroeder and a second by Mr. Elsoff. Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move on to item N as in Nancy.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsoff.
I motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings, stormwater drainage improvements, Rock Spring 4th Edition, Phase 1, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Elsoff and a second by Ms. Nguyen. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move on to item O.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve a resolution determining the advisability of the making of certain internal improvements in the city of Bel Aire, making certain findings with respect thereto, and authorizing and providing for the making of the improvements in accordance with such findings. Water distribution improvements, Rock Springs 4th Edition, Phase 1, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item P as in Paul. So the developer, this is Chapel Landing 3rd, the developer is ready to move forward with construction of public infrastructure improvements in Chapel Landing 3rd. The cost of these improvements will be financed through a bond and spread as special assessments against the benefiting lots. 3 bidders submitted bids. All bids came in over the engineer's estimate, which created the revised petitions considered earlier in the meeting. Ann Stevens, our city engineer, is here to explain the project and answer any questions.
So once again, here we are, the last half of this process. As the mayor said, the bids were accepted and are ready for the bids were taken and ready for council to accept. NOAC came in as the low bidder on the project. We have worked with them quite a bit before, have a good relationship with them, and are very confident that they are able to perform this work.
Mr. Mayor, I'll
Mr.
make a
Welch.
motion to approve the bid from NOAC Construction at a cost not to exceed $1,335,397.48 for Chapel Landing 3rd utility improvements, sanitary sewer, stormwater drain, and water phases 1 and 2, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Welch and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item Q. So the developer's ready to start work on Phase 2 of Rock Spring 3rd. The cost of these improvements will be financed through the bond and spread as special assessments against benefiting lots. 5 contractors submitted bids, with Dutton Construction offering the low bid. The bids are very close. Ann Stevens is here to explain the project and answer any questions, and our city manager would also like to make a comment.
So this is for Rock Spring Third, Phase 2. Phase 1 has already been constructed. Phase 2 is in the red on the screen. Dutton Construction was recently awarded the Prestwick water line construction. They have not worked much with the city. They worked with the city several years ago on the Courtyards at Elk Creek project on, I believe, water and sewer. It's been a few years, I don't quite remember. They did an acceptable job, and I look forward to recommending them for the project.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lasher.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to expand a little bit on this. I know council talks about value, and value is 2 things. Value is quality and price. And a concern that I have, as well as the developer, that we're only talking $1,100. So $1,100 difference between Dutton and Meese. As our city engineer stated, we did award them the Prestwick project, but it's been a while. They're a smaller firm. We do a lot with Meese. And I would just like council to consider maybe in this situation, going with Meese Construction. And as I said, there's nothing negative about Dutton. It's just been a while. And this is a pretty good sized project. We did award them Preston, and we'd like to work with them on that and just make sure that they meet our quality standards. And this does need to go forward. Like I said, I did visit with the developer. He's worked with Meese in the past as well, knows the company as we do. And so in this situation, like I said, I'd like to see how Dutton does on their current project, and then certainly be open for them to continue bidding as we move forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
am I understanding that the developer expressed a preference?
Well, so I expressed my thoughts with the developer, and the developer agreed.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, my thoughts are I certainly would love to see Dutton get on board as continue to bidding on projects. Sounds like we do have them on a project that they're bidding, so hopefully they'll be able to continue to do that. And if that goes well, I hope they continue to bid. But I'm also okay with the understanding that we want to make sure this goes well. The price is, I mean, a thing this large is fairly negligible. And if this is what Ty is more comfortable with, I'm totally fine with going with his recommendation unless someone has any other reasons not to.
Do we think Dutton's a big enough company to handle both bids at once?
I don't know a whole lot about them and the size of their workforce. Jay, have you worked with them? Okay.
Unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough with their current workload to be able to make any judgment on it. I don't know what their current workload is.
But I would assume that they would not have bid the project if they did not have the forces to do this. They chose not to bid the Chapel Landing Third project, which we just accepted NOAC's bid. So that tells me that they're at least looking and making sure that they're capable of handling whatever comes their way.
Okay. City attorney, what requirement do we have to take the low bid?
So Ann and I talked about our bid paperwork, and it explicitly says that it doesn't require you to take the low bid. Although your decision should always be grounded in like some sort of fact, like developer preference or the concern, your genuine concern about the big project, wanting to make sure that it's done right based on something though, not just, it gets to arbitrary when you say, I don't know. So I just think they're going to be not good. So you want to ground it in, experience or like Ty was saying, value, because we know that they will continue to come to Bel Aire and do more work at a lower rate, something to point to, other than just general feeling. But to answer your question specifically, you're not required to go with a low bid. That's clear in our documents, in our bidding documents.
So we could express the concern that we just don't have enough experience with them yet to award them too many bids at once.
In light of your concern that they're working on a project now that you haven't had a chance to evaluate yet, I think that's a unique circumstance.
Okay, I can buy that.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I think I'm comfortable moving forward based on the city manager's conversation with the developer. I'm always one to lean towards the developer's preferences in any case where, that makes sense. Although I am always a fan of the low bid and that being the default. If there's some other circumstance where the developer and city manager combination has got a different idea, I think it makes sense to move forward with that.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elson.
I guess I have a question. So I definitely think that the city manager's opinion on this weighs heavily. I was wondering though, I don't even know if it would be appropriate or not, but did the city have a conversation with either Mies or Dutton, or I don't know who could speak to that?
So all the parties were informed that the low bid was Dutton. We're working on making sure that, when we inform them that we remind them again that the city's not required to go with the low bid, but they were all advised, I think, through one email.
The contract document specifically stated that the city may reject any and all bids, and they are not required to go with the lowest bid.
But they were informed of the low bid through.
They were informed that at the bid letting, and then I believe through the email that went out to all bidders, that Dutton was the apparent low bidder, and that the city council would consider the bids at the current meeting today.
Do you recall that latter communication specifically said that it was the council's discretion as to which bid to take?
Since Ken sent the email out, I will let him.
Okay. It's fair enough.
Garver did send the email out. We did the bid tabulation for the project. It's our project, and all our email stated was that Dutton was the low bidder and the bids would be considered. We didn't make a specific representation on who would be selected. We haven't had any, to the question about communications, we have not had any communications with any of the bidders on what decisions would be made. That we didn't feel like that would be our place, but we're not aware of any communications, and we certainly didn't say that anybody would be selected.
Appreciate that. It just reminds me of a situation we had with Chisholm Creek Utility Authority where low bid wasn't taken, and the company that was not awarded the bid, but they were the low bidder, was very upset about that. And so I don't want to upset a contractor here because we didn't take the low bid, but I hope we do have some good communication with them to make sure that they understand what the reasoning behind this, if we decide not to take the low bid here, so that we don't have an upset contractor, and then we get poor workmanship out of the current project and no future opportunities. So, at the end of the day, I say a lot of times, all businesses look for three things out of their suppliers: quality, delivery, and price. And one doesn't take precedent over the other. They're all equal. Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
I'll make a motion to approve the bid from Mies Construction at a cost not to exceed $250,000 for Rock Springs Third Phase 2 utility improvements, sanitary sewer and water, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item R, this is a change order 2 from Dollinger for Woodlawn 37th to 45th Utility Relocation Project. As with all projects, and this is no surprise, I said this probably a year or two ago, that as we get into these projects, we will have change orders, and here we go. So there are often unseen problems that occur and require additional work. The Dollinger has had to deal with unsuitable soils and groundwater along Woodlawn for the utility relocations. As a result, they are requesting a change order to modify existing sanitary sewer manholes during this project instead of with the street construction project, which will lead to an overall better and end product. Jay Engelmeyer is here to explain the need and answering questions, and is also available for questions. So I do have one question about this project. If we're moving these, and I assume you've taken care of this, but I just wanted to cross the T, that if we're going to move these manholes from the street construction project to this project, we've moved them off of the street construction project for KDOT?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what I was going to start out explaining, that there is a change order for, I think the total, if I did my hand math right, $80,461. The majority of that is work that is currently going to be done, was going to be done with the street project. And so therefore it's not an additional cost. It's just a transfer from one project to the other. When we first pulled the sanitary and water work out, we would have pulled these adjustments out. A lot of those manholes on the 18-inch arterial are buried, at least some of them are 1 feet deep, some of them go to 2 to 3 feet deep. We couldn't even find some of them. Also, if you bring them up to the surface now, we want to bring them up to the final grade surface of the street. Most of the street's going down some, but some of them are going up. So we didn't want to mess with raising manholes up and all of a sudden have a big bump adjacent to the road. So we just said, we'll do all the adjustments as part of the street work. Well, as Don Linger gets out there and they're starting to look in these manholes when they were doing the sanitary point repairs or the spot repairs on the line, they noted all of these cones are brick, or these manholes are brick. And we knew they were brick manholes, and you have a manhole that's 4 or 5 feet in diameter so a person can get in. But as they get closer to the surface, that tapers in and narrows down to the size of a manhole, which is 2 feet or 22 inches, 20 inches. Today, we build manholes out of precast concrete, and you have that cone section that does that reduction is made out of concrete, and it's very stable. And brick manholes are still stable. It's not a situation where we need to replace all the manholes on here, but the cone sections are a little less stable. So us with Don Linger and Garver Engineering, who's your construction manager on the job, decided let's go ahead, we went back and looked at the grades, and we can live with the grades. There won't be any manholes lids sticking up out of the ground to a point where it's a traffic hazard. But also let's get them adjusted, but let's replace all of these cone sections. So there is a little additional work than what we were going to do at first, but most of those, as I said, most of these costs were going to be done as part of the road project. We're just doing them now, getting it out of the way, which will expedite the road project some. And we're also making the manholes a little better than what we were going to do originally with the road project, because we'll have a new cone, and I believe, and I don't know the limit, some of the just straight sections down will be replaced. I think they found some bricks that have deteriorated. Bricks do deteriorate faster than concrete. So that's what most of this is for. There is also some sand fill for water line. And what we have in our bid is wherever they're placing water line under pavement, we were asking the contractor to do trenchless method, what's called directional drill. We had a bid price for it it was $120 per linear foot. Don Linger got out there and they realized we're too close to some of these other utilities. We're going to have to open trench these. Well, there's a drawback to that, because now some of the driveways along where the water line are, they're going to have to open cut and close one at a time. And now those property owners are going to have to go through that again on the road project. But there's an advantage to that too, because open cut, the bid price for water line is $60 a foot. So there's actually a savings associated with this that's not put in to the change order. And it will be adjusted at the end. That's just the way Garver wanted to handle that. This is a measured quantity price. So all of the quantities that the contractor's installing is being counted. If he comes short, there will be a change order to reduce that cost later. And there will be, because we're taking a certain amount of footage of a water line at $120 per foot down to $60 a foot. I don't know what that quantity is going to be. And I'm not sure anyone can answer that now. So most of this work was work that was going to be done as part of the street project. It's making the sanitary sewer manholes better. It is the main artery where all the majority of the sewage in town goes to. And we did want to, since we're in a period where we're tearing up the road, it was something we thought we ought to do. And some of that work here will make it a little better yet. So anyway, I can go into more detail, but at this point, I think if you have any questions, I'll answer them. If not, that's really, I gave you a good summary of why there's a change order here.
So moving this from the KDOT bid process into this sewer process that we're doing now, that is shifting the cost from one to the other. And WAMPO is funding the street project that KDOT's going to manage. So my question is, are we going to lose out on some funding by doing this cost shift?
No, because sanitary sewer work, water line work, and some other things, and even the landscaping work that's going to be done are what's called a non-participating item. And even if there was, if the KDOT was going to pay for 100% of the project, they wouldn't pay for those items just because it's not something they would use federal funds for. So that's a cost you're not losing out because you're pulling it from something that KDOT's paying a percentage for.
So they would do a bid letting, and some of that issues in that bid letting are not financed by the
Yes.
WAMPO project.
Correct. And in fact,
Portion.
that's in this PS&E process. They're going through the items and saying, we're not paying for that, or that's a non-participating item. That's a non-participating item. That's one of the functions they do.
But they will be bidding it, even though it's a non-participating.
Yes, and they'll bid it.
Okay.
yeah.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it. Any other questions for Mr. Engelmeyer or Ms. Stephanie?
I guess I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Railsaw?
So looking at what you presented here, that looks pretty good. Your explanation made a lot of sense. And I guess, when we look at the overall price of this item versus the price of the project, it's a very small amount by comparison. So it seems like this is something that we should probably go forward with. And based on your explanation, it sounded like the right thing to do. My question is only, do you foresee other items like this arising to the surface, or is this kind of unusual, or is this typical, or can you just give us some perspective on that?
I think the most, I'll use the word risk, or finding surprises would have been work associated with the sanitary sewer, the adjustments here, and with the point repair. You try to do a point repair, you've got some old pipe down there, and it may just break further, and not at the contractor's fault. All the point repairs, they're done. The point repairs are done. So what's remaining is water line work, which is shallower. It's pretty standard stuff. We're having a few utility issues, or we're making sure we have a spot where a sanitary sewer crosses a storm sewer, crosses a water line, and we're trying to move something around. But that's cost-wise, there's going to be no extra for that. So most of the risk of having unforeseen circumstances, I think we've already passed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith?
did I understand correctly that you said as part of this, the project will actually cut through existing driveways that will have to be patched? How many are we talking about?
Most, I believe, the driveways that'll be cut through are on the west side of Woodlawn, south of the railroad, and it doesn't go all the way down. So we're looking at five of them, 6 of them. Is that a good number, I think? And most of those, it's in that area where there's a lot of cross-lot access and adjacent drives.
And so as part of that, we'll make sure those drives are returned to as good or better condition as they were.
They will be patched back, not as good or better, but sufficient, and then they're going to get reconstructed in the road project.
Okay.
That's part of the reason for the sand fill, flush and vibrate is we want to make sure that there's a solid surface for the heavy trucks and all the traffic going back and forth across the driveways. Don Linger has talked with each of the property owners and tenants associated with each of these point repairs. They have committed to ensuring that there's access in and out throughout the day, throughout the business hours, and they're going to put a solid steel plate over those kind of the holes, so there's still access. But my main priority was making sure that we had that sand fill, flush and vibrate in there, so we can make sure there's a solid surface. If we just filled it with dirt as typical, that has a tendency to settle, and you don't want a big ka-thunk as you're going into a business.
So you feel pretty confident that the patch, whatever exactly that means, will be such that it's not going to be a significant hindrance for folks.
Correct.
Okay.
They will be putting in a temporary asphalt patch, which it should last for a year plus.
Yeah, I probably said it wrong. It will be not just sufficient, it will be as good as the permanent pavement there. It just won't be a long-term fix, but it's going to be changed within a year anyway. So,
Okay. Thank you for that.
Do we, the water question is what's kind of bothering me. Do we think the soil was so wet because we've had a wet spring? Or is that a normal condition that will prevent us from doing any type of activity like that in the future around that area?
I think that the groundwater is kind of there, just present. The concern was is as they bore their hole through underneath the driveways, not only are there a lot of utilities, but their hole was collapsing in. They didn't have enough strength of the soil to be able to drill their hole and then push the pipe through. So it was kind of a twofold concern.
I guess my question is, we are dealing with a lot of water issues tonight.
Correct.
And how many of those areas are we going to have to keep track of so that we never deal with the subsoil water again? Or know that we're going to have to dig a trench or whatever instead of doing a boring technique?
Sure. And we're taking care of it tonight with the manholes and the water line, so we don't have to take care of it again in the future. In this area, in Bristol Hollows, we're doing the same thing. We're taking care of it now, so we don't have to take care of it in the future. And
I'm thinking even if we move to a project a block away, we'll have the same problems.
we don't know. This is kind of an unusual circumstance for Bel Aire. We're used to working in areas of fat clay soils, which we have small underground water, but it comes and goes and it's easy to work through. But these are kind of unusual areas that we're not used to working in.
and I also think the problem is maybe compounded by the fact that we've had private utility companies digging in the same area. And as they've put their soil back, it's not compacted. Time would
So it's
allow that
holding
to-
water in their ditch because
Could
there's
be.
air pockets.
Yeah, and again, they had their own contractors out there, and a lot of times those contractors will just throw the dirt in. They know something's going to happen, come along. Well, we won't bother compacting it very good. I don't know of any problems the city's had otherwise, but I don't think this is not a long-term situation where the soil's just that bad in these locations.
Do you mind if I throw in on this though for a moment? Just, we've done a few different subdivisions in town, and the topic of the water and such, that you asked, is there anything we can do to kind of pre-plan for this? And the problem that you run into in the kind of soil conditions that we have here is we generally fat clays, but we also have some shale seams and caliche seams that run through here. And some of those will perch groundwater on top of them, but it's kind of random. So the lift station project that we're doing over at 53rd Street right now, there's groundwater only 6 feet deep right there. We did a test hole roughly a half a mile away straight south of there, and the ground only rises up 10 feet, but there wasn't even any groundwater at all in the hole, and we did a 24-foot deep hole. So there's a little bit of randomness to where you can poke holes all over the place and maybe never hit those spots where it happens. There's a little bit of randomness that happens to it. I've got a project, the Rock Springs Phase 6 edition. we did a view out house with a basement in the ground, no water issues. The house right next door has got a crawl space and they got water in the basement in their crawl space. So there's a little bit of randomness where it's tough to really say we're going to establish a policy to figure it out. What you do hope is that you do have somebody do geotechnical investigations where they're necessary and you identify them. And then sometimes you just have to deal with them when you run into them, and you can't catch it all. It's just one of those things you have to deal with. So just a different perspective on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith,
I'd like to make a motion to accept change order number 1 from Donlinger in the amount of $80,461 for Woodlawn 37th to 45th utility relocation project and authorize the mayor to sign.
please clarify, did you say number 1, change order number 1?
Yes, that's what I have on my agenda.
My agenda says 2. I wonder
Yep,
why.
it's actually supposed to be number 2. I'm sorry, I did not
Is it
catch that
supposed
when I was reviewing the agenda.
Okay.
Oh, no, never, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
There's 2 on
No,
our agenda.
there's-
We're not
yeah.
to the second one yet. I
So
don't
the
think.
Woodlawn is change order number 1. Yes, it is correct. Woodlawn is change order number 1. Bristol Hollows is change order number 2.
That's what my staff report says too.
Yes.
Are you on letter R?
Excuse me, sir. I have a different report.
I'd rather catch it now than catch it
Well-
later.
Me too. I just now I'm a little confused, so I need to make sure I got the same thing that the council members are reading. Okay, it is, are there. All right, key that goes to 2. All right, very good. Thank you. Just typo in my copy. I don't know why. Okay. All right, thank you. So I have a motion from Mr. Smith,
Second.
second from Mr. Elsaw. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Item S, as in Sam. Part of the annual land bank report requires identifying all revenues and expenditures from their funds. This report was accepted by the land bank at their last meeting on April 13th. The only action required of the council is to receive and file the report. So we have a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll motion to accept the Bel Aire Land Bank 2020 ending sales report.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Schroeder and second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion, all opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. Now, item T, which is change order number 2. Okay. So as discussed earlier, unforeseen problems can occur and require additional work. Dollinger has had to deal with soil, water, and drainage issues in phase 1 of Bristol Hollows. As a result, a change order is needed to complete the work and is here to explain the problems, solutions, and answer questions. This was the project that was stopped in December because of an issue, and now we've got a
Correct.
solution here, and that's what this is about.
Correct. So, 3.5, 4 months later, here we are. A geotechnical firm was retained to investigate the soils that Donlinger found as they were excavating the site to the planned grades. The soils turned out to be a very fine sandy material filled with water. We had the Terracon performed the geotechnical exploration. They wrote their report, gave it to us. The committee of myself, the city, the developers, the contractors, the engineers, the construction engineers all reviewed it. And we had a few additional questions for Terracon. So we met out on site, and Donlinger had a backhoe on site. They dug 3 holes, probably 6-7 feet deep, the width of a bucket. And we were able to kind of further explore those soils. We were out on site maybe an hour. And at the end of that hour, those holes were pretty well filled up with water. So there's quite a bit of groundwater in the area. It was not foreseen in the initial stages of the project, just south in Chapel Landing, we had absolutely no groundwater issues. I was helping to observe that project with Schwab Eaton. Don Linger was actually the contractor on that project as well. So, they had every reason to believe when they initially bid this project that it would be similar soil conditions, but wrong. So we are stuck with working with, and it's not really unsuitable soil. The soil is fine. It's wet. And we need to get the water out so we can use the soil as it is. So the change order is for putting in basically drain tile pipes along either side of the roadway, an extra 8 inches of granular material to help the water go out from underneath the roadway into the drain tile. The drain tile is then plugged into the storm sewer system, which will take it into the pond and then out on its merry way. Under the houses, they said that, or Terracon had said that you can build on it, but you need low volume change LVC material. The sand is an LVC material as long as it's not saturated with water. So the design engineer went back and raised the grade as much as possible so they could get their foundations mostly above the water table and not have to worry about it into the future. So we have identified the problem. We're trying to take care of the problem. Everybody involved with this project feels that this solution is adequate and it will take care of the problem and we won't have issues in the future. So it's not something that was anticipated. If we did geotechnical drilling at the beginning of the project, you're drilling one, maybe 3 holes over the entire site. The chances of running into this material are pretty slim. If I would have chosen the locations to drill, I probably wouldn't have drilled in that area. So it's, you're asking for just like a needle in a haystack, basically, trying to pinpoint this location. So the change order is high. I knew it was going to be at least 6 figures, but I believe it is reasonable for the work that is being asked. I don't believe that it is gouging the city or the developer by any means, but it's just, unfortunately, it's what needs to be done to get the process moving. I have talked extensively with the developers. They are accepting of this and they want to see this project moving forward. Don Linger is ready to start next week. They have time available in their schedule as soon as we can get this approved through council.
Thank you. Somewhat related, but not on the same exact subject. I remember from a planning commission meeting in December, I believe it was, there was a resident on the north side of 53rd concerned about the development and runoff. And I don't know, are we impacting that property owner anymore? I mean, I know they're not Bel Aire, they're county, I think they're
Correct.
carve out. Are we impacting that developer anymore with these developments? Or that property, I should say, not developer.
Yes and no. As I'd mentioned earlier, a storm drainage report was done in advance of this project during the plating stage. And that looks at the post-development and pre-development runoff. And the post-development runoff must be less than or equal to the pre-development runoff. So Caw Valley Engineering designed a pond that will help retain that stormwater until it can be released at a rate that is less than or equal to the pre-development runoff. So no, because the amount is the same, but yes, because it's concentrated. So we are sending a gallon of water instead of sprinkling it over the site. We're pouring it in one location, so it's coming out in a stream. But they have taken some steps to help the stability of the stream and to make sure that, not the stream, the ditch, to make sure that that doesn't degrade further. I remember Keith has looked into this issue and the property owner's concerns, And some of the property owner's concerns were issues that he has brought upon himself by planting of trees and disrupting the drainage course. So yes, he does have some merit, but it's a larger problem, there's much more involved in it than just one or two developments. And I do know that he was concerned with not just this, he was concerned with the school and some of the other developments around that have been here for quite a while.
So thank you for that explanation. I appreciate that. So just to summarize what you're telling me, the rate or the flow rate is going to be the same before and after development. It's going to flow for a longer period of time.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
How many lots does this affect? And would it be cheaper possibly just to abandon some lots?
The developer has looked at that and they have determined with consultation with the engineer that this is the best way to move forward. We did look at possibly abandoning some lots and turning them into more of a park or open space. And you need it over pretty much the majority of the lots in order to make it work. So we did look at that, and it was their determination from their financial analysis that this is kind of the best way to go. There may still be at least one lot that they do not build on, but have as an open space park area.
Okay, and if we made that lot maybe a small pond or something to evaporate off more of the water, was that looked at?
That was not looked at because of the grading of the overall site. It's just not feasible.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
how common is this type of issue? I mean, as we talk through this sounds really strange to me. And like, if I were going to build a house, this would really concern me, and I'm not sure I'd want to build a house in this area. But I don't know, is this really common? Do developers deal with this all the time? How unique is this?
In Bel Aire, it's not very common. I have been working in Bel Aire both for the city as well as for a private consulting firm for about 8 to 10 years now. And this is the first time I've run into anything like this. Mr. Lee has been working in Bel Aire for longer than that. And I believe has kind of a similar experience. You know, occasionally you've got pockets of water, but generally not the entire issue. And part of the low volume change, the LVC material, that would be required anyway for slabs on grade. So it's just putting it in now instead of at a later time. And with the developer still paying for it.
So these houses are going to be slabs then? Is that what I just heard?
Some of them are, yes.
They're not going to have basements that are going to have a
Correct.
constant flooding problem.
Yep. No, they've, and I posed that question. They're like, no, we know which lots can be view outs, which lots can have basements, and which ones need to be slab on grade. They're very aware of that. They are planning on keeping the duplexes after they're built. And so they do not want to have any future problems.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Mr. Elsa.
So as I recall, these lots are at the edge of the development.
They're at kind of the southern edge upon just mainly adjacent to the pipeline easement. But we did dig a test hole that was further north, kind of more into the middle of the development, and it had quite a bit of water as well. So it was out of the sand, but it was into more of a fatty clay, but it filled up with water just like the rest of them did.
Right. I was having trouble picturing that area, and I was just curious, is this next to an area where we would expect further development beyond the current plats and land available?
So what this takes care of, it takes care of the entire Bristol Hollows addition. The grading is over the entire site. The pavement only goes for part of kind of the loop. Do we have the Bristol Hollows plat? I'm not sure if that's.
I thought it was on.
I think it was up there earlier.
Yeah, I thought it was up there just a minute ago.
So we do have the other development just west of this though, right? That we just
Okay,
talked
so,
about earlier. Is that correct?
So they will be building the cul-de-sac and the street up to, actually, this is Chapel Landing Third. That's not Bristol Hollows.
Is there another slide?
We don't have it then.
Doesn't look like there's another slide. Nope.
How many lots was it directly affecting?
The change order itself for the dirt work covers the entire plat. It covers the entire subdivision. So we will not have to come back in phase 2 and redo any of the dirt work. The under drain lines only cover phase 1. So as we move into phase 2, then there will have to be accommodations made during the design for continuing the drain lines as perceived necessary for the continuation of the pavement.
Okay, so I guess I was just curious to understand a little further when the item there for regrading and then the 8-inch subgrade drainage layer. So that's physically removing like the top layer of the soil and then laying down the drainage layer and then replacing it over the top.
So the site regrading and LVC import, that's the regrading the entire site to bring it up a little bit.
Mhm.
And then the 8-inch roadway subgrade drainage layer, that is taking about 8 inches down from the existing subgrade that Donlinger has graded already, taking that dirt out. They can use it on other portions of the site, and it is calculated into their dirt volume, and bringing in some granular material to allow the water to flow through the subgrade so it doesn't and mainly we're concerned about the freezing and thawing, because as water freezes, it expands. So we want to make sure that water can get out from underneath the pavement into the drain tile so it doesn't sit underneath the pavement and freeze and break up the pavement. Is that kind of what you were?
Yeah, and I guess obviously we're all probably share the concern that we want to make sure that this solution is a definitive one, that we don't, I mean, obviously you can't predict future problems or whatever, but it seems like a good solution. But we're trying to weigh that with the cost, and I guess that's where I have trouble getting perspective. This is kind of an unusual issue.
Very unusual. If it gives you any comfort, the design team consists of 3 engineers, myself, the design engineer, and Brent Wooten with Baughman, who has probably at least 30 years of experience in this area. He's comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with it. The design engineer is comfortable with it. Geotechnical engineer is comfortable with it. So there's 4 engineers,
Okay.
plus the 3 developers. The developer team is comfortable with this, and they're all confident that this will work. And Donlinger, with their years of experience in construction all over the city, they obviously come, build it, and they're gone, but their reputation is on the line too. They don't want to put a bad product in the ground that 5 years later is going to break up and people are going to say, oh, that Donlinger did that. I don't want them back again. They're very concerned about their reputation, and they do have a very good reputation within the community.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So houses get built here. What if some of them start having water problems? Who's on the hook for that?
That would be the developer.
Okay.
And they have agreed that this change order, this process forward is what needs to happen. They do know, like I said, that, which lots need to have slab on grade. They don't want water problems. They don't want to put basements or view outs in these locations with all the issues. It was the geotechnical engineers thought that once we get the water draining out. Once it's got a pathway to go, it will go out and it won't come back. So they're all fairly confident that we can get the foundations built, we get the low volume change order in, we get water moving through the area, that we're not going to have a problem into the future. But it's kind of also like playing God. You can't foresee what's going to happen 5-10 years out, but it would be the developer's responsibility.
And then I guess my final question, I think I know the answer to, but I'll ask it anyway. With this being such a large change order, such a large dollar amount, should we be asking for other competitive bids on it?
Unfortunately, it is part of the project. I would not want to bring in a third contractor or a second contractor into this to get into the mix with Donlinger. They have already planned with their equipment on site and moving forward into the second half of this project and finishing it out. They're planning on using all the equipment, the time, and have it all worked in. If it was easily separated, then we could certainly look at other bids, but it's generally not a good practice to solve issues with a second contractor when the first contractor is on site, familiar with the area, et cetera.
I suspected that would be your response, but I just wanted to make sure.
Doesn't hurt. Public needs to know too.
What kind of paving is going to be on that street? Is it going to be more susceptible to heaving since there's water underneath there?
It will be concrete paving, and concrete can actually bridge anything a bit more than asphalt. But with the drain tile, we're going to be getting the water out from underneath the paving, so we shouldn't have the issue.
I was concerned we were putting in asphalt and it wouldn't last 5 years because it'd be moving constantly.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I have another question.
Mr. Vilsauf.
I think it's for the city manager. How are we covering this with our budget?
So I'm trying to think if we've already, if we've issued, I don't know that we've issued the temp note for this yet. If we have, then we would use some of our reserves that the city has. We have about $1 million in reserves to cover that until we got the next temporary note, when we would basically repay ourselves. If we haven't issued the temporary note, then we would just add that to the temporary note to borrow the money. So we'll cover it. We'll either add it to the temp note if it's not been issued, or we'll cover it until we get reimbursed from a temporary note.
But this eventually will be bonded out and assessed as part of the specials, right?
Yes, and that, again, that's why we get the developer involved, because added cost, and then that's special assessments that affects their development.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
So just the worst case scenario that I'm imagining here is that this $250,000 gets spent on the site, and then we somehow discover that it's not enough, and there's another $500,000 of changes that need to happen here, and maybe the project no longer makes sense economically. Who's on the hook for all of the site investments here? And I guess my question is there a way that the city could get stuck footing the bill for this if at some point the developer has to walk away?
Until all of, so the developer has put together a 35% letter of credit. So in other words, they've got a bank covering 35% of the cost. Let's say all of the infrastructure doesn't go in. The roads they haven't put the roads in yet, have they?
Correct.
Okay. So they haven't put the roads in, and if they walked away tomorrow, then we've only got what we've spent to date, and then we would pull on that 35% letter of credit, which is the total amount of all of the projects. So the goal would be that we would get our money back, and there would be ground that would not have streets in it, although there would be dirt work done and things like that. Worst case would be that everything goes in. We'll always have that 35% letter of credit until they have sold or issued certificates of occupancies on 35% of the lots. So let's say they walked away and said, well, we're not going to do anything. And so we would take that. Now, that means that there's still a portion that's not, that has to be paid. And so then the goal would be like a developer that goes out they've got their bank's going to be on the line. So the bank's going to step in and take over the property. And then we would work with them to try to get somebody else to go in and take it over.
So in this specific case, do you feel like the 35% is a sufficient guarantee? What I'm also thinking about here is it feels like each individual lot has a unique set of circumstances that maybe won't fully be explored until it's developed on.
We have turned enough dirt that every single lot on this project has been explored, and we're very confident as in the solutions moving forward.
And I think it's important to note, it's like we're saying, it's very new to us. But if you go over to 29th, roughly in Mays, all the development that's taken place over there, if you were there 10 years ago, that was basically a wetlands. It wasn't called a wetlands. It wasn't, dedicated as a wetlands, but that's what it was. They actually had to bring in 3-4 foot of fill to develop all that. And if you go over there today, you've got Target and New Market Square and all the new housing and stuff in there. So, so to give you a little bit more comfort, it's done in Wichita. It's just not done here. I mean, we've never run into this before, as Ann said. So that's the other thing I look at is, they did it there, and that was basically a wetlands. This is just, we've got a high water table. So if they were able to figure that out and get that kind of development with those type of houses over there, with all the engineers we got involved here, I feel pretty comfortable with dealing with the high water table.
I'd like to just back up on that financing a little bit. Earlier this evening, we had to redo some resolutions because of some changes in the financing and the money. This looks like it's a pretty big nut that's addition to what was the original engineering proposal. Are we going to need to do a new resolution for these additional funds, or what happens there?
So as long as this addition comes under what the engineer's estimate was, we don't have to. I'll have to look into this and see if the original resolutions can cover this additional cost. If it can, there's nothing else that you have to do. If there is, then we would have to revise the petitions and the resolutions.
Okay. And the 35% that the developer has put into a letter of credit is based upon that, the funds or the numbers in those resolutions. Is that correct?
Yes. So let's say water, sewer, paving, stormwater was $1 million. They've got a letter of credit for $350,000.
So are we going to increase that letter of credit since we're spending another $250,000?
Yes. So they would have to increase the amount because it's 35% of the total project. So since they're adding some dollars to the cost of the project, they'll have to increase the dollar amount for their.
But that's based upon what's in the original resolution, correct?
Yes. So yes. Okay. I'm following you. Yes. So the original resolution, if it's $1 million and the bids we've got are 800,000, then they still owe us a 35% letter of credit for the $1 million. So
if it's 1.25 million,
yeah,
then we've got to make some changes in the
Then we would have
resolutions
to-
and ask for more
to get that up.
more on the letter of credit.
Right.
And those resolutions need to be done before we approve this change order, right?
Mr. Henry actually did some preliminary calculations this morning, and he's comfortable with the crawl and the petitions that were covered.
I think we're okay.
Yes.
Good. Okay. I appreciate you looking into that, because that was, when you see this much money, it gets a little bit of concern that we're going to go over
Exactly.
what's already authorized. What are we doing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, he keeps a pretty close eye on that to make sure that we're staying under the petitions and resolutions.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Elsoff.
I motion to accept change order number 2 from Donlinger in the amount of $247,005 for Bristol Hollows Phase 1 paving and drainage, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Elsoff and a second by Mr. Smith. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. The only other items we have on the agenda tonight are executive sessions, and I suspect they may take a little time. So I'm going to ask that we take a 10-minute recess and then go into 2 executive sessions. Okay, so we'll reconvene at 9:10.
Mr. Mayor. I'll make a motion to go into recess for 10 minutes.
Second.
Aye.
turn the light, turn this back on. Okay, I'll call the meeting back in order. And we need to have a couple executive sessions. So the first, and these are for non-elected personnel. I would like to ask for a 30-minute executive session with the city manager.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
make a motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to the KSA 754319 exception for the same. Request to invite in the city manager. The meeting will be for a period of 30 minutes and the open meeting will resume at 9:40 in city council chambers.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Dr. Schroeder. Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe the motion included the city attorney.
It was intentional to not have
Oh.
the city attorney. You're correct. You're all right. Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We're in executive session for 30 minutes with the city manager. So I'll wait till you get the light on. Okay, are we on? Okay. Call the meeting back to order. We held an executive session. No binding action was taken. And I will entertain a motion for another executive session for non-elected personnel and request invite the city attorney. Where is our city attorney?
How long do we need?
15 minutes. Because we don't need to talk about the process. It's the same.
I suppose the city manager doesn't have to be in the room again before we call this.
No, he's not part of the council, so. Sent her a text. I'm sorry?
Quality TV here, dead silence.
Yeah, I sent her a text, so hopefully she, between Melissa looking her down, trying to find her, track her down, and that, there she is. Okay. So I will entertain a motion for executive session for non-elected personnel, and invite the city attorney to attend. I think we need 15 minutes.
Mr. Mayor,
Well,
I'll make a motion to go into executive session for the sole purpose of discussing the subject of matters of non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319, exception for the same. Request to invite in the city attorney. The meeting will be for a period of 15 minutes, and open meeting will resume in council chambers at 10 o'clock.
Second?
motion from Mr. Welch and a second from Dr. Schroeder. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. We're in executive session for 15 minutes. He's got turns there. Okay, I'll call the meeting back into order. We held an executive session, no binding action was taken, and meeting's back in order. And I think we want to extend the executive session.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Smith.
make a motion to extend the executive session for an additional 10 minutes with the open meeting resuming at 10:10 PM in City Council chambers.
Second.
So I have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Elsa. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Executive session for 10 minutes. Motion carries 5-0. Okay, I think we're ready. All right. We held executive session and call the meeting back to order. No binding actions were taken. So we're back in session. Next item is discussion and future issues. Anything we need to discuss on future issues? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I take Mr. Welch's motion to adjourn and Ms. Wynn's second. Any discussion? I don't think so. Okay, we cut it off. Call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. See everybody in 2 weeks. Thank you.